and we might just have a look at that now. So same Jamboard we used last time, but on slide 10 is where we start today on our fourth session. Isn't it amazing? Time passes. So we thought we would just look backwards at Kahane and give you an opportunity to reflect on that. And then we thought, based on what we've been hearing and what you said initially and what we talked about last time, we thought we might look today at what actually, for me, in putting this together, I've realized, again, confirmed that this thing about sharing control is really a fundamental part of the collaborative mindset. We can do all the processes and stuff we want, but this thing about how do we do it with, how do we let go is really important. So worth spending some time on. So any questions or anything before we dive in? So we've got three of us. If we then pop to slide 11 on the Jamboard, we will, as usual, give you a chance. I think we'll pop you into a breakout room, the three of you. Just have a bit of a chat and a reflection. I know Scott's got some stories about the stuff he's been working on. But what did you do? How did it feel? What happened? Have you been able to think about the application of this little decision tree, or what might it look like in your world? Just have some conversation about that, and we'll do some reflecting on some of the challenges and value of that. Make sense?
Yep.
All right. Well, let's pop you into the breakout room then.
We were mid-flow.
Yeah, I disappeared there.
Sorry about that. Sorry. It is one of the things about this online stuff. It's when we're in the room, we can see where the flow is happening. And but anyway, so on what were you flowing?
Shona was talking.
Yeah, I was just basically saying that when I kind of look at this, I think the bit that I am struggling with sometimes is in the lower half of the diagram. And it's when you actually further develop out force. So when I look at it in its simplistic form, I can certainly see that as an agency, we were forcing an awful lot to begin with. And that force was just straight force. It was, here it is, now you do it. And pretty much no discussion, or if there was a discussion, it was a tiny little one where you kind of floated it in front of them and that was it. Now we are definitely, I would have originally have said we were collaborating, but looking at that diagram, I'm not quite sure. I feel like there's something between the collaboration and then, that inform and consult. It's not just a little consult, it's a huge consult, partial collaboration in creating the details. But if I was to take the definition in the purest form, then I would say, well, no, maybe we haven't left that bottom square, but I think we have partially left it. So that's the bit I'm kind of nutting out those little nuances. And I've just told everyone I've just done a road trip this week. There was a lot of time to think between Townsville and Rockhampton and Sydney. And so I've been kind of trying to unpack some of these little nuances as to how far are we and where is that line, or is it like all things, it's a gradient and you're somewhere along the gradient.
Yes, interesting. So I wonder if Mel or Scott, have you got any reflections on Shona's questions or thinking there? What do you see there?
I was just looking at the IOP2 spectrum, because you got 4 out of the 5 there off that. So that the IOP2 spectrum goes from inform to consult to involve to collaborate and to empower. So empower is the one that you don't have there. And I wondered if maybe what you are talking about, Shona, is collaborate, because it does really engage with people in the decision making. Like you really take on board.
Changes are made because of what they say.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if it's a tricky situation, we all come to that decision together. As to.
But it still reflects that the actual decision gets made. Technically by you. And where you actually fully hand over the power is empower, which is the next stage, which is not on this.
That's right.
This diagram. So I don't know. Stuart or John, if you would reflect on where empower would fit in this.
Yeah, interesting question. I think just stepping back from that for a sec, for me, this model, the key question, and I absolutely understand all that discussion, Shona, and your thinking about that. For me, a key question when I think about this framework is, can we change it unilaterally? Can we do this on our own? Can we make this change? Do we have it within our capacity to make this change? If yes, then that means we're within this broad force box, whatever the detail of that is. If no, then we really have to work on it. We have to work on it together. A bit like Scott and your kitchen. It's not something you can do alone. You have to make those decisions together. It's not a unilateral thing, is it?
Okay. All right, so then it is collaborate, because I could make the decision, but they won't follow through. So I'm not actually going to get the outcome I want. They'll all be underground, breaking the rules, not enforcing anything. So, I can't do it by myself.
Well, you probably could make the decision, but if the decision doesn't work,
you're not going to get the outcome.
No. So it might be that you are in the force space, but you don't get the outcome. So it's a pointless exercise. So basically you're saying, I think the point that Stuart's made, for me, it's about that you are truly sharing the decision making. In New Zealand they call it partnering, right? With iwi, it's the difficult step, because basically you might have to change your mind and get something that you didn't think was the appropriate way forward. That's the collaborate space. It's that multilateral. You have to have their input, and it's likely you don't even know the answer until you've involved them.
No, and it's true. And I have changed complete direction. Yeah.
But I do think that just that dialing that we talked I think last week about dialing it up, that if you start from, you might say the bottom of the force space where it's just a tell, all the way up to basically we still hold the right to make the decision, and we could make it on our own, but we're going to involve them as much as possible. So that's sort of dialing it up to a 9 or a 10, but I think it's still that question. What flips you across is that one about, can you do it unilaterally or multilaterally? That's an interesting question about empower.
Yes.
Mel?
Yes, I've been wondering about that, and I mean, it's something I suspect that in a good collaborative process, and it's part of what we'll talk about for the rest of today, this sharing control, there's probably aspects of any process where you are actually handing over decision-making to pieces of it, even if it's only small pieces of it. And I think it's something that I want to add to this conversation. Shona, are you at collaborate or the other parts? You're probably at all of them in different aspects of your project, and diving in and out. So I think I wouldn't use this as a definitive, there's one answer to this question for my project. It's, all right, now today I've got this decision to make, or we collectively have this decision to make. Is it a force? Is it a collaborate? There's scales of decisions, aren't there? Everything from what are we going to have for morning tea up to where are we going to build our bypass, and everything in between. And there's elements of empower or collaborate or just plain inform force in any of those.
What about just the other thing I guess wanted to bring into this is that one about, can we bear the situation as it is, or can we change it? And if the issue is no, we probably often sit in the adapt space. And the question is, in the political environment particularly, I guess, Scott, what you described to us seems to be a move into the, can we bear this situation? It is, yes, we're just going to have to live with it and adapt. And I wonder how often we find ourselves in those spaces where we can't really change it, or we don't want to change it. And so what do we do?
Yeah, and I think that it's funny thinking about the difference between exit and adapt for me is similar to thinking about the difference between collaborate and force, in that we often end up at exit or force, but then we try really hard to like operate in the grey area between exit and adapt, or between force and collaborate to sort of like soften the blow.
Yep.
So we probably never get fully to adapt. It's more of an exit with a comms strategy.
An exit with a comms strategy.
Exit nicely. Exit softly, exit. So that's really interesting. What are the implications of that, of exiting without looking like we're exiting, or forcing without looking like we're forcing? What are the implications for projects, for government, for the agency?
Well, I personally think that when we do that, which is what we typically do, the members of the public just see right through it, and they say that it is an exit or a force. And, you know, we've just spent extra time trying to soften the blow, but, you know, at the end of the day, we're not giving them what they've asked for. So that's all they kind of hear.
Or maybe we're not being honest about it. I wonder if part of this issue about integrity, belief in government, perhaps comes out of doing exactly the two things you talked about. We want to look like we're collaborating, but we're really forcing, or we want to look like we're adapting, but we're really exiting. And I wonder if that reduces sort of just that trust, that amount of degree to which we are willing to work with you. I think one of the values of this potentially is that it makes it a little more visible. You can be a little more honest. Don't know if that helps, but we've found where people have used this, it's made it a little easier.
I think the problem we've created is that we used to just exit or force without question, and we would just report on the facts and say, these are the facts and we're the experts, and therefore and then, you know, there was no issue with trust or integrity because that was just not a question. Now it's like we're kind of trying to operate in this collaborative space, but sometimes we need to be the experts and we can't genuinely collaborate. So there's all this smoke and mirrors, which has ruined the integrity and the trust.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, partly I think with the best will in the world, I mean, the question is, do your colleagues, do the powers that be in agencies understand the difference between collaborate or involve, inform? It seems we promise a lot of collaboration, a lot of work with, in a well-intentioned way, but we probably don't live up to that promise, perhaps because we don't really understand what it is we don't understand the implications of that promise.
I think for us, we've become so big with so many branches or what have you that that's what's made it challenging for the higher ups to understand the difference. Like, you know, we used to, RTA would just do roads. Now that we're transport, we're also responsible for how much people pay when they get on a ferry. So that's very different to where's the new road going to go? How much do you pay on the ferry and how many trains come per hour? It's very like customer driven. So it's hard to kind of have a broad brush across all the parts of our agency.
John, you and I were just talking just before you all joined us about uncertainty, and what I'm hearing there, Scott, is as the scope gets bigger and more into customer needs, wants, values, it moves more away from that we are the experts, here's the answer, here's the data, into the space of questions and uncertainty. And I wonder, I sent in a follow-up email last week, I think I linked to a little video on the Cynefin framework. I don't know if anyone took the time to have a look at that. Did any of you check it out?
I haven't looked at any of my email from last week yet. Still working back through the last 2 days.
Sure. Oh, I reckon if you get a chance, do that just a few minutes on this Cynefin framework, and it really does address this question of the difference between those situations where we've got the known facts and those situations where there's facts are contested. You know, it's much less clear, much more uncertain. And in fact, that's the space where we do need to be down in that collaborate box, because we don't know the answer. We don't even probably know what the problem is, because it's messy it's equivocal, it's contested, it's values based, it's ever changing, and so this whole collaboration context is placed in that box, where it's complex, where it's uncertain. We really do need to be better at collaborating. I don't know, Jonathan, would you add anything to that?
No.
I think for me, what I just said about the agency struggling with all this stuff, it's important, I think, for me as a project manager to consider that, but then also put it out of my mind because I've got no control over all of that. So I just need to take the facts and try and get the outcomes I can get in my control, sort of thing.
Which is a bit of an adapt strategy, Scott.
Yeah.
You can't exit and you haven't got the control over it. So
yeah, true.
Just reminded me, Stuart, just thinking about that Cynefin framework. So we tend to rely on often the expert state, particularly a technically oriented organisation full of scientists or engineers. And so that becomes the natural space. It's natural just to find a solution, to rely on the tech. In the complex space, Cynefin would argue that it needs to emerge. And that's harder for the technical people to step into that uncertainty, the emergent space, because we're trained. I'm an engineer by trade, and we're trained to know the answer, to use logic to get there. And so it's just recognizing that if you're facing those type of more complex issues, you need more than just the experts. You also need to think or allow yourself some choice around the emergent nature of the problems as much as the technical. You need both the technical and to allow a bit of emergence. So for me, the Cynefin framework just helps think about the state of the problems we're facing are a little different to what we're used to. And so we're well trained at the ones we're used to. And we just have to think a little, the opportunity is to think a little differently in the other spaces to perhaps get those outcomes, as Shona and Mel said, that one about people will own it, and not undermine me at the end, because, otherwise pretty frustrating when you put it all in and then doesn't bloody work. And that's where we get that rework, which isn't terribly useful.
Yes, possibly the difference between how do we build a stretch of road on the one hand, and Shona's piece about koala policy, bigger, messier, woollier, more values, more moving parts, more stakeholders. It's a hard problem, a wicked problem. So that's more that complex space where we genuinely do need to work and get all views in the room.
So it's almost like that can we change it laterally? It's not quite the right question, because being government, we can often change it unilaterally, but Shona's point goes to, well, should we change it unilaterally?
Exactly.
That's an interesting change to that question. Yeah, you're right. There's a moral element in that, isn't it? Rather than just the logical.
Well, not even moral. It's practical. Like, will it actually give us the outcome we want?
Yeah.
And if it won't, then yes, we can do it, but
yes. So maybe there's more. There's a second part to that question. Can we change it unilaterally and make it stick?
Yeah.
Make it work unilaterally.
Yeah. Can we make it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, get the outcome. I'll make it stick sounds a bit like the bulldozer, Stuart. Sure we can. We just need to hit them a bit harder. But will it get the outcome that we want without us having to roll it in?
Yes, that's right. And in any case, I think like any framework, it's useful only so far as it's useful. And if all it does is shine a light, help us ask ourselves, is unilateral or multilateral, and if so, why? Then that's a really useful action, a useful role it can play.
I think the other thing about Kahane, if you read his book too, it frees you up to actually force when you need to. When I've found that this has really helped a lot of managers go, okay, so it's okay just to do what I'm doing. It's all right, because it's this, we've got to collaborate. Am I doing the wrong thing? And I think oftentimes people see that. And if you read his book, he talks about the relevance of doing it when you need to. So it's that choice that you have rather than right, wrong. It's more about this is appropriate and absolutely appropriate. And it might be appropriate to force at some stage and collaborate at others. And it can be time related, situation related. So giving people it's okay. That's how I've found people like this. And particularly when you make it visible, they go, oh, okay, it's okay. And we're doing this. And that's why we're doing it. Let's move on. So it removes some of the mystique and the conspiracy about what we're doing here. No, we're just being clean about it. So that's another use I've found of the tool.
Yes, yeah.
Because there are some by the government by having power is because citizens have conceded that power to government to make decisions, and there are certainly many situations where it's perfectly appropriate for them to do that.
If you don't like it, change us at the next election. But when you did vote us in, and we're going to do what we think is the right thing. So, I think we can own it. Nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
But at times you might say, well, we can own it, but we won't get the outcome we want unless we actually perhaps apply a different approach to it.
Yes,
gives you that choice.
It's not about right and wrong, this tool, absolutely. It's about just some questions to ask ourselves. When is it appropriate? I know working with one of my council clients, and the CEO has been heavily engaged, and she really likes Kahane because it freed her up. She's been trying to get the organisation to be, in quotes, a collaborative organisation. But the risk to everyone, the questions people kept asking is, does that mean we have to collaborate all the time on everything? And she didn't really know how to answer that until Kahane came along. It was, all right, so now we can see that actually collaboration is just one box. There's a whole bunch of other appropriate responses. So so that's good. It freed her up and allowed her to think that through.
So let me, the sting in the tail for that for me has been some client I've got who's a regulator, and they've actually taken this as almost permission to keep forcing. So be careful that you don't use it to reinforce what you think is the right way, just because, John said I can force it because I've got Kahane now. So I did find that there's some risk here in that people may actually use it as a bit of an excuse to keep doing what they're doing when perhaps they should be doing it a little differently.
Well, that might be where that addition to that question might help. Is it going to actually get you the outcome you want?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
because I certainly know, in the EPA, for example, that's the question that they ask a lot. And rather than enforcing, even though they can, they often don't go that route.
Yeah, that's good. Just keeping an eye on the time. Any questions or other observations about Kahane and its application in your world?
I've got a question. Again, so I'm sort of teasing out this number 2, adapt. And I certainly know lots of situations where we're sort of saying, well, can we bear this situation as is? It's not optimum, but we're going to adapt and just deal with it. Is there anything or any way that you could see that you might try that for a while and then kind of go backwards and move around once you realise that may not work? Is there anything, again, it's all about this, is this the outcome that you want? It may not be the outcome that you want. It's the easiest outcome because, but it often means a lot more work when we adapt for the agency because we've kind of put up with the situation and bear it the way it is, because I actually think we haven't really gone right to the heart of the situation and design something in full collaboration that will fix the problem. So what we're doing is adapting in a sort of a very poor situation. And I suppose I'm just trying to say, I feel like I want to kind of do more. Like you've got your unilateral decisions and your multi. For me, it's like a flow chart. I want to kind of loop it back again and start, when it's not working.
If the adapt's not working, try something different. Look, I think there's absolutely. I think you can. I'm going down this path, but set yourself a goal. I mean, and a measure. So I'm going to try it, and if a month's time, I'm going to see, is it getting me? Or again, think of the light on the hill. Is it getting me towards the light on the hill, which is that outcome I'm after?
Yeah,
if it's not, you might say, okay, we're just going to go back and try the other path. And try. We're going to try in the collaborate space. And I think the value then is people see we're moving forward. We're just trying a different approach because we're not getting what we need to get.
Yeah, it hasn't solved.
Yes, absolutely. So I think Kahane would argue that this is situational, and you shouldn't just say it's not one answer and once it's fixed, that's it. I think you've got to keep an eye on what you're getting, and if it's not, you
adaptive management.
Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly. And Kevin would back you up. You advance by learning how to do it, not by saying this is the way we're going to do it. So I think you've just put your finger on that. Very good. Okay, well, let's move forward, if that's all right. And what we wanted to do is think about, and it's all very relevant, I think, to the conversation we've just had. It sort of emerges from that. What does it mean to collaborate? We've always said here at Twyfords that collaboration is as much about, collaboration really happens between our ears. You know, it's the thinking of collaborators that makes the difference, much more than what you do. It's how you are thinking when you do it, when you interact with your stakeholders, with each other. And I think one of the key parts of the collaborative thinking is this sharing control. You know, I'm a nervous passenger in a car, but I'm not at all a nervous driver. Why? It's because I've got my hands on the wheel. So I guess as a collaborator, our job is to be helping them get their hands on the wheel. So what, in the context of your projects and working with your stakeholders, what does sharing control mean? What does it mean when you see that phrase in the context of your project work? What's conjured up? What's sharing control about for you?
You want to get them to put them, have a go at a sticky note and just stick them on the wall?
Yeah, sure. All right. You might as well on slide 12,
on slide 12.
Just pop them there. What does sharing control mean to you on the Jamboard there?
I'm going to put one up, Stuart, because I just thought of one. You can too.
Yeah, I was going to. So element of risk. Chance of more widely accepted outcome. Yeah, okay. What's the element of risk?
Well, that was me just from that, I guess, engineering background, like what John was talking about before, that if you think you've got it sorted with the expert team and then you share control with someone outside of that, then there's a risk that you won't get your outcome, or the outcome won't be what the experts perceive to be the ideal outcome, which, you know, the experts might be wrong. But if the experts are in control of the process, then it's a risk to them.
They're probably answering a different question.
Yeah.
Which is the challenge.
Yes, that's right. Although at the same time, as Shona has highlighted in her earlier question, there's a risk to not working with stakeholders, isn't there? It's a different risk, but it's still a risk to the project.
Could you say that there's a risk that there's no outcome at all?
Look, I'm sure you would all have oodles of stories about projects which don't get an outcome. So yes, we've all been there, haven't we? For sure. So I'm meant to be doing some work up in Brisbane next week. I thought I was going up to run some workshops, but you know what? It's been called off for internal eruptions and da-da-da. So yes, these things, absolutely. I think if we don't engage and collaborate in the right, appropriately, things.
Or I think what I'm hearing Shona say, if we do engage and collaborate, we might not get an outcome. I suspect that a lot of people would probably think sharing control means, oh my God, one of those talk fests will do lots of talking and get nowhere, because I keep hearing from people that that's one of their real fears about allowing people into my process, is they'll muck it up. And we won't get anywhere. We'll just talk endlessly. I've lost count a number of times. I hear that as a reaction when we say collaborate or engage or whatever. It's, oh my God, not one of those.
That's a reality for us internally. We get stuck in it, talking about loop. The more people that are involved, and someone needs to actually, thinking about sharing control, like in that situation of not getting an outcome. Maybe the most important thing of that is before you commence the sharing, you need to appoint the sharing champion, or, who's going to you need a chairperson who can rule the final decision.
I mean, I think a facilitator's got lots of processes to solve that, and particularly if it's something taking you off track and you are, as you said, you're not seeing the light on the hill anymore. You've gone down a path over a valley and, all that kind of stuff. There's lots of little techniques that you can use to kind of park that information and then move it forward another way, which still means they are in control and they still make the ultimate decisions, but you've just got somebody maneuvering, facilitating it basically.
Yeah. There's good process and bad process for sure. I mean, we've talked about the diamond, the grown zone as just a little example of that, and we might touch on that again shortly. I think, let me share a screen with you. I've got a few slides that just to open up this conversation a little bit. This one, if I pop that onto. So I think one of the things, and I've heard it today, and one of the things we certainly often hear is this dilemma with, it's our responsibility to make this project work. Everyone, we need to build the road. The minister's promised this, so it's up to us. We're in the hot seat. And at the same time, I've heard Shona's part of this dilemma. But if everyone doesn't own this, then it's no outcome at all. So how do we get the project done in a way that everyone owns the outcomes? So there's a bit of a dilemma there. And in here is the control tension. Does that resonate at all? You recognizing that? So if we, the more the risk we see, the bigger the risk that we're not going to get this delivered on time, the more we're inclined to control it. It's got your champion there. You've just talked about someone who can make the decisions in those group conversations.
A client currently, so they wanted a independent chair, and the independent chair is a fairly forceful, controlling person, you might argue. And it's interesting because part of the dynamic about the failure of the collaboration has been the sense that this person is controlling the process and not independent. So, well-intentioned, but again, it's this, I need to make sure this works, overwhelms that desire to have people owning the outcomes unintentionally, but quite powerfully. That control at alive, I guess, at work. Yes.
And what this results in is something I see a whole lot, is the collaboration steamroller. We are collaborating, But to the poor old stakeholder, here comes the government roller coming over us again, making the decisions or telling us how we're going to collaborate or who's involved or what's the data or what's the decision.
Or whether to be quiet or speak up. I mean, it's as simple as that. There's many ways that the people don't feel like it's collaboration.
Yes, or this is an hour and a half workshop next Wednesday, 9th, from
be there
11:30. So there's a range of ways in which we give off signals of control in our steamroller, while in our heads feeling we are trying to collaborate because we know that we need their fingerprints on the process. Again, is that matching your experience? Do you recognize that?
Have you seen the bulldozer?
Yeah. So of course, the more we sit in our steamroller here, our bulldozer, the less people will get ownership and buy-in, of course, of the outcomes. So one of the things we've already seen in this, and we've shared, is this, the groan zone piece, the convergent thinking. And of course, if I'm here and we're converging, and I'm feeling the need to control, what do I try and do at this point when in our conversation we're converging? What's my instinct?
It's to shut that down.
Yeah, that's right. To shut it down, to get to the point, to get to an outcome. I'm sure the people in this room want us to get somewhere today. So, what is that outcome?
Let's get there.
Who can we look to make the decision, to decide, to clarify what it is we've got to? And I think it's interesting. John and I have recently been sort of thinking about this, and this is a real controlling aspect. It's subtle. It's subconscious, but I think we do it to be helpful. We all want outcomes from our time together, so let's try and quickly get to that point. It's another way of controlling conversations. So what we wanted to do is just share some. We built a bit of a table here, which you can't see all of. I'll just step through some pieces of it, and then I'll give you some other stuff, and you can go and have a bit of a think yourself. But what we thought is that we actually see a lot of organizations telling themselves a bit of a collaboration fairy tale. You can see this is the title of this document here, the collaboration fairy tale. So we're saying, for example, we're telling ourselves that we consider their needs. We're working hard to get their buy-in. We're helping them to understand. We ask lots of questions to try and understand their view. We try to hear all perspectives. And therefore we're collaborating. We're doing those things, and yet, what in reality, these are all subtle ways of exerting control. We're exerting control while rationalizing it as collaboration. Our worldviews, our needs get preferenced in all of those things, subconsciously, subtly. It's a control mindset that we're playing here. We talk collaboration, but our hands are still firmly on the levers, so we're acting control. We have the power. We're the gorilla in the room. One way or another, we're powerful in that place. So that's the fairy tale. I don't know. Again, does that resonate?
Good example, Stuart. I had a client this morning, so we're in a group session. We have a new person who's joined. We were talking about how to use the collaborative frame around a new restructure, which is going to be very emotional and huge change for the organization. It was interesting because this person, while talking very much about collaboration, they preference their worldview, maintaining their status. They actually talked about what's really important, that we keep the big picture here, and it's all about how this will make the organisation better. It was very much and it was a very subtle but a very powerful control piece with a bunch of people where we're really trying to explore how you don't use that, how you actually free people up. So it's a good example for me of talking collaboration but acting control in a subtle and out of awareness way. It wasn't intentional. It was very well-meaning, but the impact was probably our questions, experiences, interrogation as evidence of, why don't you just get with the program? You know, it was a message there that I certainly heard. I suspect they did too. Sorry, Stuart, keep going. Here's Chris.
There's Chris, that's good. So the challenge and the opportunity, the sharing control opportunity is to shift from we consider their needs to a mindset, and Scott, I'm sort of reminded of some of the points you've made.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
That's why
we consider their needs to we don't know.
So this is really talks.
So we're letting go of our power, we're resisting the need to control, we listen as loudly as we speak, we actually make the power visible. We talk about it, we make it explicit rather than just pretending it's not there. We actually talk about power in our collaboration. Who's got it? What does it feel like? Who's feeling powerless? Who's feeling powerful? And what are the implications of that for our work? We're partners, not gorillas. And so that's the shift we want to be making in sharing control. And as John said, a lot of this is out of awareness. It's subtle, but it's incredibly powerful, the signals we send as collaborators.
So just pick up on that point, Stuart, we don't know and need your help. So we might share a video after this from Peter Bregman about I don't know, just the power of I don't know and I need your help. And I think you'll find that quite interesting, just to sort of illustrate the shift from that knowing to not knowing. That is one of those elements of letting go. So we haven't got time to go through it now, but suffice to say, I've probably found that one of the most powerful bits of feedback from a number of clients that talk about the thing I've learned with my team is to just go in and say, I don't know, rather than I know, but also the hardest lesson, because we're leaders. Our job is to know, and to not know is challenging internally and even for the people that are hearing it, because, well, you're meant to know. So there's lots of pressure to know. So moving to that don't know and need your help space is a real shift in the power dynamic and a useful one to consider and practice.
And it matches that shift, John, from the Kahane, doesn't it? From we can do this on our own to we can't do this on our own. It's that same mindset shift.
And it sort of supports it, because you can't do one without the other. If you're still thinking it's hard to move into a space that says, well, I need your help. Because why would I need your help if I know? And we all know the answer. I mean, we're all trapped in this one.
Yeah, indeed. So in practical terms, here's a far from complete set of examples of what does this look like in practice potentially. Counterintuitively, do less, achieve more. I had a client in Melbourne, and she was sort of the project lead on a group of external stakeholders, agencies, community councils around catchment management. So, one of those really complex, how can we clean up the river problems? And Julie was responsible for the project, and she felt really responsible for this group, their work and their well-being. They'd come together specifically for this project. And, fairly early on in their collaboration, they started to struggle. There was a bit of argument about what should we be focusing on, what do we do next? And Julie was looking for advice about that. And we talked about it was really this: do less, achieve more. Her tendency was to go in and, well, what do you think her tendency was in that context? What was Julie naturally inclined to do?
Do things for people.
Yeah, that's right. And one way to frame that is rescue the group, get them out of their stuckness, pull them out of the mud, rescue them, do all that stuff, work out, give people the answers. And the group wallowing in the mud is probably looking for it. Please, Julie, help me get out of the mud. But in fact, all of that is disempowering, and all of that reinforces the power who's in charge here, doesn't it? So do less of that rescuing. We talked about this, and Julie let them sit in the fire for a little bit. And in fact, a solution emerged from the group after a bit of pain, but they were in the groan zone. And when they're in that groan zone, it's so hard to resist that rescuing urge, which is really a manifestation of I'm in control here and it's my job to make them feel good.
This is a big lesson for a facilitator too. Is my experience has been that do less with the group, you achieve much more. And the tendency is I'm being looked at by the boss who's employed me to be the facilitator, so I've got to get an outcome, and it forces sometimes and not useful behaviour. Yeah, you're using all the skills and the tools, you're doing a great job, and everybody thinks you're a fantastic facilitator, but you're actually less useful for the group, because sometimes that doing more, just directing them a little, helping them, you can fall into the same trap.
Yeah, it makes it about us, doesn't it? And I think
and we like it. They're good ego. Oh, you're a great job facilitating that group. We'll have you back next time. But you're actually less useful than you could be.
Yeah, indeed. So all this really is about letting go of every decision to the extent you can. Again, dial it up, dial it down. Some decisions you really are yours, and so you dial your collaboration down. Others, I would challenge us to dial up more than we think we can, because this is the letting go, the inviting our stakeholders in. I often talk about it as stepping back, which allows my stakeholders to step forward, and get their fingerprints on this thing.
Just that second point, Stuart, make visible your control dilemma. I think sometimes actually acknowledging where you're at and making this is part about vulnerability. This is about being able to say, I don't know, I'm not quite sure how to do this. I think I might over control this, so I want you to tell me, or here's my dilemma. You know, I don't want to over control, but I want to help you. How can I do it? You're actually making visible the challenge you face, and you're asking them to help you with that, rather than you having to take it all on board. So every time share the questions that are on your mind, our tendency is to have to solve them internally. I've got to solve this, rather than here's a problem I've got, I need your help. Can we solve it together? So you're moving to the with space, and you can do it in small ways about process, which can help them on the content.
So I might just stop that sharing and come back to the Jamboard. Chris, have you got the Jamboard?
I think I do. You sent an email, didn't you? I haven't got it open.
It's on the chat.
Okay.
As well.
I'll put it back in chat anyway. There you go. Got it again there. So we've just looked at that table. That's slide 13 and 14. But maybe we'll pop you back out into a breakout group again, just to think about this control paradigm, considering your project, the current work you're doing. Where are you exerting control? Where might you let go? Just see if you can, do a bit of brainstorming together. We'll give you 5 or 10 minutes to do that, and we'll come back and do some reflecting on that.
So that's on Jamboard 15, the 2 questions.
So I'll pop you back into your rooms. Oh, welcome back. Well, we were waiting with bated breath for all your fabulous post-it
You're talking
notes.
too much.
That's good.
It's good. So, what feels challenging about this letting go concept, or what realizations have you had about it?
We struggled to really get to the point where we were just talking about I guess we were trying to understand where how we would get to answering these questions in our different contexts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit hard to work out what control is and what letting go is. Well, for me, I was thinking it's hard to know what I'd let go of and what that looks like and what power I've got to do that, I guess, in my project sense.
So when you think about it, Scott, is there, what's in the way of letting go for you?
Well, I was saying that we've got to we kind of got all our process and things of how to build a road or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's there as a guideline, and then our project managers just could do what they think is best anyway. So we don't really let go of anything. We just do what we think we need to do. And if someone tries to stop us, then we try and find a way to exert control. We try. I don't know. I really can't think of a situation in my work in the last little while that I've kind of gone, oh, well, I'm not going to fight that battle. I'm just going to accept it. I just sort of think that as a project manager, probably for everyone, you've got that internal responsibility. So if you let go of something, the closest I can think of letting go is, okay, I'll do that, but my program's going to change and it's going to take 6 more months and another $1 million. So suck on that.
Okay, let's come back to all that. Anyone else?
The argument around the time taken and the resources taken to really collaborate and involve a lot of people it's a really difficult one. So I am involved in a regional project at the moment that is doing a lot of collaboration and a lot of going out and talking to people, and I have been questioning myself exactly how collaborative are we being, because there is, there's still control in there. And my initial problem was actually trying to determine who the you was in this question, because we are taking a collaborative approach. Are we talking the whole project, which is hundreds of people, or are we talking the project team, or are we talking me, or are we talking the project control group, which is a slightly bigger group involving lots of different partners? I ended up taking it as the project team because we ultimately make a lot of the actual important decisions for the project. And yes, we are collaborating with a lot of people, but I know on the edges of the project, there are still lots of people who've been frustrated with the process, even though we've done multiple workshops and had lots and lots of engagement and tried to reach as many different people. We still are aware of networks and groups that are important to the problem that we still haven't reached. And people regularly do turn up at workshops and say, we only heard about this last week. You didn't make this very accessible for us. It's too short notice. There's lots of other people we know of that would have liked to have been here. And we know that. There's just a limit to the practicalities of trying to get out to so many people on, we do have project timelines we have to work within. And honestly, the team absolutely busted their guts to get to as many people as they could. It's still important to ask all of these questions, I guess, and keep a check on yourself. But then there is, because it's a plan, we're coming up with a kind of regional plan and a set of priorities. We have power over ultimately what goes into that plan. And, so there is, and I guess it's just about being transparent and aware of where you're making those decisions and how you're making those decisions. But I think for us, the real opportunity to let go is in the next phase, which is the implementation phase, which will be where we go back to everybody for a second time and go, okay, this is what you told us, or this is how we've pulled it together anyway. We think this is what you've told us. Let's validate that. And then what are you going to do to be part of this plan? And I think that's where we really do start stepping back. And it's an interesting one because there's 2 focuses of the project. So that one of them is working with local government. And in working with local government, there is, we definitely want to try and embed it in their processes. And the challenge is that local government's in such a challenging position with tight resources, not enough staff. If we say we'll do something for them, they'll just go, thanks, do it. Quite often they don't really want to be engaged. They just want us to do it, to solve that problem for us. And so there's always a sense of every time we ask for their time, we have to make it really worthwhile because their time is so precious. So that focus of the project is a little bit different. The community is kind of the opposite. They really want to be involved and they almost are saying, we want more time on this. come and spend more time with us. Let's really make this happen. And so, yeah, it's really interesting, the different kind of responses.
That information.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we go. And I guess it's just about being transparent about where those decisions are made and where the power is, and where we're sharing it, where we're not.
Yes, and I think being aware of all those things you've talked about and the implications of all those things you've talked about and the choices you make collectively through all those things you talked about is sometimes that's all we can do, is notice it, pay attention to it, recognize the consequences, and do what you can in that context. At the same time, I think what we're not suggesting here is that you give over decision making. That's not the implication of sharing control. It's actually much more subtle than that. We can be in our steamroller believing we are collaborating, but in fact, where the signals we are sending are all about this is our project, and we are inviting you into our project more or less on our terms. They're the signals that can be subtly sent. So the question could be, how do we deliver this project, which is ours and ours to deliver, while signalling to people and giving them the opportunity to get their fingerprints on this to the extent possible. And if we keep that question in our mind, recognizing it's a really hard one to answer in all those constrained worlds, we might find ourselves finding ways to go along the journey.
So let me use an example that you just raised, Mel. So you said how to really make it worthwhile for them. So if that's a dilemma you hold, a question, what you tend to do is solve it, and you solve it on your own. How do we make it really worthwhile? Well, if we do this and this and this, that'll make it worthwhile. So one way to let go there is just to ask them, how do we make it worthwhile for you? So you're just moving from, I've got a problem and I need to solve it, to I've got a problem and I can ask them to solve it. It's not giving away control. It's not letting them make the decision. It's then I'll still make the decision about what we're going to do. But you could be surprised, and it sends the signal that Stuart's talking about that says, you matter, I'm listening, this is being done with. Your fingerprints will be on a little more.
We have had really good evidence, I suppose, that works in that. So two of the councils we're doing a special sub-project with, and they're two of the most stretched councils. They've, one of them's got serious financial problems and the other one's tiny. And, they actually couldn't deliver the project by themselves, so that's why we're delivering it. But that being said, being the most resource-constrained councils out of all of them, when we actually set up a mechanism in the governance for them to be involved in the decision-making, their GM, in certainly one of the cases, and the other one was a very senior staff member from both councils, they've made it to every meeting. They've come to full-day workshops. Like, they have made it their priority to be there. So, contrary to what you might assume, they have actually made room for it out of their very limited resources.
But it's the signals that you're sending that are the important thing. The signal is that we're doing this together, and you can only give up what you can give up. But sometimes we can be surprised about what we can.
What people are able to do.
Well, it's the choices you're making. It's when you're making a choice, I need to decide here. That's the opportunity to say, how might I do it a little differently? Like I could ask them rather than having to solve it on my own. Actually frees you up a huge amount, because it takes pressure off you as well from having to make all the choices in this. But they can be process choices. They might be about the road or where it's going or the policy, but they can be just how we're getting together or what makes it meaningful to you. Those are the things that send huge and many signals that can then change the dynamic while still working within the constraints.
It may also be that in your example, Mel, that those little councils recognising their constraints would not step up to the plate so much and would say, no, please, you decide that, because we haven't got time. but that's their choice then. It's not
Yep.
your choice.
Yep.
And again, you've signaled to them.
Yeah, and that has absolutely happened as well. Yeah.
You matter. That's the signal. You matter in this. We are not doing this to you. We are doing this with you, or at least we are trying. Our aspiration is to do this with you. And at every jump, every fork in the road, we'll stop and ask you. And,
or we'll think about checking in. You don't have to ask them about everything.
Everything, yeah, no, that balance has been tricky because
But even if you do it on one or two things, but they're the things where you aren't really sure, you know it'll have an impact. So you might be judicious about where you do it as well. But it's about sending the signal that we can let go where we can and just seeing what happens. And oftentimes, as you've said, you can be surprised. When you invite people in, it can change the whole dynamic, but it certainly then sends the message about we are doing it differently here.
Yeah.
Yep.
And where you can't stop and ask, then the one thing you can do under those circumstances is name that and say, I'm not inviting you in here because for these reasons. And acknowledge the implications. And again, you matter. Even when I'm not asking you, you matter. And that's a key signal. It's 1:30.
And Scott, I've been thinking about Scott's issue too, because of course we have a lot of technical information in the project, which is, there is a question about even what we release of that to our wider stakeholder group and so on. And then there's there's quite a lot of technical expertise in it and analysing that and then walking people through it and communicating it and so on. And I guess that is then about communicating that information, but also saying, actually, we're not asking you to analyse it because that's not your job. You're not the experts. We've got the experts to do that. This is what they say. Now you can perhaps participate in this decision on the basis of that information.
And that's where Kahane can play a bit of a role. Here we're unilateral, where the experts it is, but around the edges or on this parts, that's where you're invited in. So again, you matter. We're not doing this because we're bad government. We're doing this because this is process, and here's how you'll be involved. All right, just again, as always, conscious of your time, 1:30. As always, just moving right to the end of the Jamboard, slide 18. Based on this conversation, we'd be encouraging you to go away and think about this. Over what aspects, small, large, probably small, and that's okay, can we share control or plan to share control in this next week and bring back that thinking, that experience next week? Any questions?
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And we'll send you, we've got a few things to send you that you might find useful we've talked about. So have a look through those if you get a chance, and we can chew on those next week too.
Yeah, indeed. So you might just, as you sign out, just do a little one word in chat, a one word checkout. What did you take away? What's the takeaway from today? And then we'll see you all in a week.
Okay, see you next week.